Hello, my name is Steve Bowler and welcome to Juniper vLabs lab number 5. In this video, we're going to be taking a closer look at network address translation, specifically using Source NAT IP pools. So this is going to be similar to lab number 4, in which we did Source NAT interface, but instead of using an interface on the firewall, we're going to be using defined subnets or IP pools that we're going to use for the trusted hosts to translate to an external or a routable IP address. So if we look at the diagram, we see that we have loopback 0 that we're going to define on the VSRX, and that's going to simulate our public IPs that we want to route out to the internet across the untrust zone, so that internal source traffic from the private IP range of the 10.100.x.x will be NATed to those external facing IPs. So there's a little work that we have to do up front. What we're going to do is we're going to make the subnet between VSRX and Host3. We're going to put that on a 200 network, and that's going to simulate our publicly routed internet facing subnet. So let's go to the VSRX. And before we get started, what I want to show you guys is the Juniper vLabs portal. This is in lab number 1, where we show you how to get set up, how to get an account, and how to access the lab. So what we're going to use for this lab is under the security labs, we're going to use the zones policies configuration, and I'll provide the initial configuration to this lab inside of our GitHub repository. And that's going to be Juniper vLabs Lab 5. So inside of that repo, we're going to have the step-by-step guide for you to follow along with the instructions. And then we'll also have the initial device configurations. So let's go to the VSRX. And I've already started the lab for you. It takes about 15 minutes. I'd already booted everything up so that we don't have to wait. So let's get right into it. I already have the VSRX prompt up, and if I do a show interfaces or show configuration interfaces, we have gig E002, which is the connection between the VSRX and the untrust, our host 3. So we're going to define that as 200.0.13.1. So now that that's defined, we'll go to host 3. We'll do show configuration interfaces. And I already had that defined. So it already has the publicly routed subnet. So let's go to the next item. So let's take a look at the diagram one more time. So what we're going to do is simulate host 1 and host 2 trying to make a connection to the external IP of 200.0.13.2 through the untrust security zone. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the host's source IPs, and we are going to perform source NAT on those using a pool of IPs. But first, we will show you what it looks like. We need to build a route. We're going to simulate routing has been configured between the VSRX and an external host, which is host 3. So to do that, we go to host 1. If we do a show route, we see that there's no route to the 200 network, so we'll go ahead and just add a static route. And then the next hop is going to be the VSRX connection to host 1, which is 11.1. So let's go ahead and try to ping the external device, host 3. So we'll try to ping 13.2 from host 1. And you can see that we are unsuccessful. If we go to the VSRX, we'll do a show security flow session. We'll just do a refresh on that. We'll start the ping again from host 1. We'll go back to the VSRX. Okay, so I apologize for that brief pause. So what we were supposed to see is traffic coming in to the SRX. And I believe what we're seeing is packets being dropped. And I couldn't figure out for the life of me why that was happening. But when I went and looked, the interface 002, I guess when we configured it, I accidentally configured it with a /32 subnet. So yep, that'll do it. So let's go ahead and change that. I apologize. To a /30. And then we'll go ahead and delete the other IP. Okay, so that should fix us here. So now when we do a show security flow session, we'll go ahead and start the ping from host 1. We'll just do a ping of 5 or 15, that's fine. And there we go. Now we see the traffic. So this is what we wanted to see. So what we see is traffic coming in from R1, or host 1, I mean. That's 11.2. And the destination is 13.2. So that's host 3. And we see that the traffic is unidirectional. We see packets coming into the firewall, but on the out line, we don't see anything returning. So this is normal behavior. Let's look at host 3. If we look at the route table, and this is a simulated external device. We have a default route that's to the management interface. That's for reachability to the device. And then we have a couple of other networks, some public networks defined, but we don't see the 10 network defined. And that's normal behavior for an external client. We don't want to see the internal trusted network behind the firewall. So what we're going to do next is we're going to define a pool of IPs that the firewall can use to take the internal networks, the 10/100 networks inside the trust zone, and we're going to translate those IPs to the pool of IPs in which we define on the VSRX But first, what we're going to need is a route on host 3 to route back to those public networks that the SRX is going to be advertising. In this case, we're going to put a route in host 3 for the 1 network and for the 2 network. So we'll go to host 3, we'll do set routing option static route, and then we'll do 1.1.1.0, and that's going to be a /30. And the next hop is going to be the firewall. And so that's 13.1. And then while we're at it, we're going to put in the 2 network. This is going to be for host 2 when we set that up. But in the first example, we're going to show you, we're going to simulate some traffic from host 1 outbound to host 3. And then in our second example, we'll do some outbound traffic from host 2 to host 3. And we'll have 2 separate pools. The first pool is going to NAT host 1, and the second pool will NAT host 2. So let's go to the firewall. And the first thing we're going to do is define the pool. So if we go into configuration mode, we do set security. And if we go, we can always look at our step-by-step guide for the next steps, and I have them all defined. So we'll do set security NAT source pool 1 address, and then this is where we will define the /30 network. So again, the pool name is going to be pool 1. And then you can see that we have the command address, and then we'll define our pool of addresses to pull from. And then if we go back to the step-by-step guide, once we have that defined, we're going to create the interfaces, and we're going to create the IPs. We're going to simulate them being on the loopback. And so again, this is defining the interfaces that the pool will use. So let's go to the VSRX and we'll do that. So we'll do 0, 32, 1, 2, and the last is going to be the third. Let's go ahead and commit that. And then the next step, we're going to define the security zone in which the NAT policy should use. So let's go back to the firewall. And we'll do the command set security NAT source rule set. And then we're going to give this a name so that we know what this rule set is defining. So we'll do internal hosts to untrust. And then here's where we're going to define the zones for the traffic to traverse. So we'll do from zone trust. We'll hit the up arrow And then we'll do the zone untrust. So again, we're just defining the security zones that the NAT policy is going to use. So the next step is going to actually be defining the NAT policy. And then, so this is where we're going to match on our source addresses, and we'll match any destination, and then we're going to put the pool which we defined as the action. So we go back to the firewall. If we hit the question mark, we then are going to add the rule. So again, this is something that you name. I just kept it simple and I just named it IP pool NAT. So we're going to match on the source address of 10.100.0.0/16. The destination address is going to be quad 0, so any destination. And then we have our action for the traffic that matches this rule. We're going to perform the source NAT pool command. And then we're going to specify the pool that which we created, which you can see from the list already, which is pool 1. Okay, let's go ahead and commit that. And it looks like we have an error. Oh, I see what we did wrong. Let's hit the up arrow. So we have 2 from zones. I should have put the to zone. So there we go. Let's go ahead and try that now. Okay, so let's do a show pipe compare. Just verify what we have here. We have our rule set called internal hosts to untrust from zone. Oh, there's an error. So let's do this. Let's just do the up arrow. We'll go back to the from zone. We're going to take the from zone untrust out. So I apologize about this. Okay, now if you do a show pipe compare, we have from zone trust to zone untrust. Then we are going to be specifying the rule IP pool NAT, and that's going to match on source 10.100.0.0/16 to any destination. And then our action is going to source NAT based upon pool 1. So we'll go ahead and commit and quit. If we go back to our step-by-step guide, we'll go ahead and try the ping again. So back to host 1, we'll just do a ping count of 10. And it appears to have failed. So let's look and see why this failed. Let's just do a security flow session. We see the traffic leaving, but we don't see anything returning. Let's go back to host 3. Oh, there it is. We forgot to hit commit on host 3. So we have the routes already there for the pools. In this case, we define pool 1, which is 1.1.1.0/30 on the firewall, but we forgot to hit commit. So let's go ahead and commit and quit. And now let's go ahead and start that ping again from host 1. So this is from the trust device or client to the untrust zone. So the ping looks like it completed and it succeeded. Let's go ahead on the firewall. We'll do a refresh on the security flow. Let's go back to host 1. We'll hit enter. Go back to the VSRX. We have to do this sometimes. The firewall doesn't catch it. Let's do a ping without the rapid. Go back to the firewall. And now you can see that we have traffic sourced from host 1, which is 11.2. That's what we see in the diagram as the endpoint, the source of the traffic. And the destination is 13.2, which is the external facing client, host 3. So we see that traffic coming in 000. And then we see the NAT translation taking place. What you can see here is 3 of the 4 IPs in the pool are being used. And so you can see that the traffic is bidirectional in nature, and that's why we have the ICMP echo replies on the host 1 device. We're seeing the replies. So this appears to be good traffic. What we've demonstrated is the source NAT using IP pools. We did this by simulating a loopback 0 interface, a public IP range that we wanted to use for traffic. We want to hide our inside private IP range when it hits our firewall, and when it goes external to the untrust zone, to the internet, it gets NATed to a public IP that we choose. And then from host 3's perspective, it sees the source of that traffic as being on the 1.1.1. So it's on the 1.1.1/30 network range. And so that's what it's replying to. When it hits the firewall, the return traffic goes back to 11.2. So another command we can do on the firewall, we can do the show security NAT source rule. And if we hit question mark, you can see our IP pool NAT is there. And you can see we have 200 translation hits. So let's generate some more traffic from host 1. We'll just do a rapid count of 5. And then if we do the up arrow, you see that we have 5 new hits. So the policy is being hit. We can see that by looking at the show security NAT source rule output for that policy. Okay, so for the last part of this lab, what we're going to do is we'll go to host 2. If we do a show route, I'm going to add a route to the host 3 subnet. So we'll do set routing option static route 200.0.13.0/30. The next hop is going to be 110.100.12.1. That's the VSRX. And we're going to go to the VSRX. We will define our second pool. So the first thing we want to do is we'll go ahead and do a set interfaces loopback 0.0 family inet address 2.2.2.2/32. So if we go back to our diagram, that's our second pool. And what we're going to define in this policy, is traffic coming from host 2 is going to use the 2 pool and instead of the 1.1.1/30 pool. So before we do that, let's just show you if host 2 is using pool 1 or not. So we'll do ping 200.0.13.2. We'll just do a count of 5. You can see that it's successful. We'll go back to the SRX. Let's do a security flow. We'll start this again. We'll just do a slow ping. And we can see traffic. So let's go ahead and stop this. So on the VSRX, we see 12.2, that is host 2's IP address. The endpoint, gig001, is 12.2. We see the traffic going to 13.2, which is host 3. And we see it using the first IP pool that we set up. The traffic is bidirectional. We saw the ICMP echo replies, so everything is good. Let's look at our policy on the SRX. Yeah, it looks like we lost reachability. Let's try to get back in there. Looks like our session is ending. We're gonna have to restart this. Give me 1 minute. Okay, sorry about the brief pause. I just had to boot up the vLab again because the time ran out. So the last thing that we were doing is we were going to create a new pool and we were going to force traffic from the host 2 subnet, the 10.112.0/24 to use pool 2, and then host 1 is going to use the pool 1, which is 1.1.1.0/30, and that's going to be for 10.111.0/24. So in the firewall, if we do a show configuration security NAT, and we see that we have the 1 pool already set up, excuse me. So we're going to set up the second pool. So we'll do set security NAT source pool, and then we'll call this pool 2. And then the address is going to be 2.2.2.2/32. And what we're going to do is we'll go ahead and delete the rule IP pool NAT. And then we'll just create 2 new rules. So this should be pretty easy. So we'll do rule number 1 is going to be IP pool 1. and then we're going to match source address 10.100.11.0/24. This is the network between host 1 and the firewall. The destination address is going to be all quad zeros, so anything outbound to the internet. And our action is going to be source NAT pool, and that's going to be pool 1. So the second rule is going to be IP pool 2 NAT, and then in this case we're going to match the subnet that host 2 is on, so it's going to be source address 10.100.12.0/24. And we're going to match the destination address of any. And then our action to perform is going to be to source NAT pool number 2. So we'll do a show pipe compare. We can see that we're adding the new pool 2, and we have modified our rules. What I'm going to do is delete this old pool. So let's go ahead and do that. Or wait, sorry. The minus in the configuration means that it's going to be deleted, so we don't have to do anything. So let's go ahead and commit that. We'll quit. And then let's give it a test. So before we test this, we'll do a show security NAT, and then we'll do source, and we'll do a rule all. So let's do this. We've got IP pool 2 rule, IP pool 1, and we have 0 hits for either of the pools. So on VMX, our host 1, we'll go ahead and run a ping. So again, we're pinging the external IP of 200.0.13.2. And we'll just start that. If we go to the VSRX, now we can get a little more granular. We can look at the specific rule. So if we do IP pool 1 NAT, and you can see that I have hits. I have 12 hits. If I hit the up arrow and refresh that, now I have 16. And I can further look at this by doing a show security flow session. And what we can see is traffic from host 1, which is 11.2. We can see that it is going to 13.2, which is the host 3, the external host. And then we can see a response from host 3, and it's responding to the IP pool IPs. So we have 1.1.1.2 and 1.1.1.3. So it's automatically choosing an IP out of that first pool, which is pool 1. So let's go to host 1. We'll stop that. So we have no flow sessions currently. We will go to host 2, and we'll go ahead and start the ping. So we have replies. That's a good sign. If we go to the VSRX, and now if we look at pool 2, you can see that we have 11 hits, 13, 15. So let's go ahead and do a security flow session. And now what we see is traffic from host 2, which is 12.2. We see that traffic going to host 3, which is 13.2. And then we see the response. We see bidirectional traffic. So we see host 3 responding to host 2. And the host 2 IP is the NATed IP from the IP pool that we created, which is 2.2.2.2. So if I look at that again, that IP is staying consistent, the source NAT IP. So that's it. I want to thank you again for joining me in this video. I encourage you to follow along. You can go to the repo on our GitHub account, which is Bowler CBT Labs. And I'm going to post this in the video for you to get to. There should be a quick link inside the description on YouTube. So thanks again for watching the video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Thank you.